Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name is Doug Hartjes. I'm on the board of directors of the Association of Fundraising Professionals of Western North Carolina Group, and a real privilege to serve our members in the Western North Carolina area. And I'd like to extend a special welcome to everybody today. I think the topic that we're going to be discussing is going to be really fascinating for everybody and very relevant to the evolution of AI. So I want to thank you for coming, first of all, but I also want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Our title sponsor, UNC Asheville, especially grateful for their support, as well as the following folks: AB Tech, Community Foundation of Western North Carolina, Wells Fargo Financial Advisors, and Colton Groom. So thank you again to our sponsors. You make a lot of things possible for us, especially this programming that helps with continuing education and professional development for our members. So we're grateful for that. I had the opportunity earlier this year to hear Nathan Chappell speak about AI at the conference in New Orleans, and I was absolutely fascinated by.
Towards the bottom, I think it's in the tax.
And I would just remind everybody to put yourself on mute, please, so we don't hear your conversations. Thank you. And but today's topic is on AI, and I think you'll find the information that Nathan has to deliver today to be very compelling and very relevant to how it's going to be used in our industry and beyond. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Nathan as a thought leader, public speaker, author, inventor. Nathan Chappell is one of the world's foremost experts on the intersection between artificial intelligence and philanthropy. Nathan serves as Senior Vice President of Donor Search AI, where he leads AI deployments for some of the nation's largest nonprofit organizations. Nathan's subject matter expertise has been featured in several publications, including Fast Company, University of Notre Dame, and the Association of Healthcare Philanthropy. Back in 2021, Nathan founded Fundraising AI as a member-centric collaboration of nonprofit professionals with a focus on data ethics, data equality, privacy and security, sustainability as well. And Nathan presented the first TEDx on the topic of artificial intelligence and the future of generosity back in 2018. Nathan is a member of the Forbes Technology Council and holds a Master in Nonprofit Administration from the University of Notre Dame, an MBA from the University of Redlands, a certificate in international economics from the University of Cambridge, and a certificate in artificial intelligence from MIT. Some great credentials, a great speaker. I'm happy to introduce to you today Nathan Chappell. Thank you, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here and spend my morning. I am just, for those that don't know me, I'm based in Southern California, so I'll be sipping my coffee as we go through this. But I'm used to our mornings. Most of our team is on the East Coast. In fact, I already had a call with the UK this morning, so we're off to the races. With a smaller group like this, I think it's great to be able to have the opportunity for people to interject and ask questions. So I would just encourage you, I really consider this your time to come off mute, ask questions. You raise your hand in the chat or whatever, and we could call on you or blurt it out. So no fear of being rude. I really consider this your time. We have plenty of time to go through this, and I really want to make sure that don't leave the session without either some practical application or some questions that are unanswered that you were just wishing that you had an opportunity to ask. So full disclosure on that. I know, I believe you can all see my screen because I checked earlier, so we'll just kind of go in. Again, we're going to take this from a kind of a combination of different ways of looking at generosity and where it is today, the application of AI and generosity, and where the future lies with this. And really, truly, when we think about advances in AI, we think about really the opportunity to accelerate and foster more generosity, but also it comes with great risk of doing harm to our sector as well. So we have to look at it from both lenses. So I'll kind of cover all of that. If this resonates with anyone, I know it does for me. I mean, maybe because I'm of a certain age where, I grew up with this, but this is how it feels for a lot of people. I spend around 10 hours a week reading and listening to AI journals at this point, and I literally feel like I only scratch the surface on a weekly basis. for a lot of people, they feel like there's like this whiplash of like, what was not possible is now possible with the advances of ChatGPT, and how that's transforming and changing our sector, society, your work, expectations, all of that. So I don't think we have to go further than Ferris Bueller to really feel and kind of empathize with this idea that things are moving really quickly. I mean, to the point where AI has been around for quite a while, actually. The term was coined in 1955, but it's really in the last 10, 15 years that AI has really captured, the imagination, but also how businesses perform and how businesses are evaluated in the world. And now, essentially, what we have is AI developing AI as well. So code developing code, which things like ChatGPT do very well. And all of a sudden, we're experiencing this exponential learning curve. So it's okay to feel like this, and it's just pause, ask a lot of questions, be the most annoying person in the room, which that was me for many years when I knew nothing about AI, and moved into the space. By way of reference on that front, just so you know, that I spent 20 years fundraising. So I started out raising money for Boys and Girls Clubs, where we had just here in Southern California, probably the best, most rewarding job I've ever had in my career. Just amazing mission and organization, but also really hard fundraising wise. I moved on to UC San Diego, where I was associate vice chancellor, advancement services, campaign, and other things. And then from there, I went to City of Hope, which is one of the founding members of the NCI Cancer Networks, one of the oldest cancer hospitals in the country, where we started using machine learning back in 2017. It was really a response to this idea that for most of my career, no matter how successful I was, at the end of the year, I was always given a goal that was bigger than the goal before. And so if we hit historic fundraising goals in one year, I was, christened with a new goal that was more than the prior year. And then, which tends to be a truth for most organizations. If your goal doesn't go up, I'd like to meet you and, figure out how you negotiated that. But the other part was a really interesting side effect was we were raising more money, but from fewer people. And that is a general truth in US philanthropy right now, is that you're essentially being asked to raise more money from fewer people. That was really where I really started my interest in figuring out, like, what happens if we know what happens if we continue to do the same thing. I don't think it ends well for anyone, but what happens if we do something different? We experiment, we try new things. And that was really back in 2017, my original exploration into machine learning and deep learning. We'll discuss that a little bit. When we compare our sector to the private sector, we know that there's this digital divide. There's always been this notion that the digital divide is among, from an economic status perspective, those that have versus those that don't have access to things like the internet or computational power. But when we think about sectors, private sector versus nonprofit sector, the digital divide is fairly significant. Even the smaller nonprofits that, if they were given free AI, they probably wouldn't have the resources ability to activate it. And so when we compare this, we look at the private sector. These numbers are pre-ChatGPT, so this is before November of last year. But before ChatGPT, 50 to 60% of private sector companies are using AI already. The average number, though, of AI deployments is around 3.8. That number is skyrocketed since ChatGPT came on the scene, which is essentially just made AI more accessible. And so with that said, these numbers are growing rapidly, and I'll compare and contrast where the nonprofit sector is. But how these companies are using AI and how they're evaluating, it's also a little bit different. So McKinsey, if you're the nerdy type and want to follow kind of like, if you want one place to kind of follow what's going on in AI, McKinsey has a group called Quantum Black. McKinsey Quantum Black is really their kind of like forefront of like what AI is doing in society, the future of work, and things like that. So it's a great resource if you want to just follow one thing on LinkedIn or YouTube, or sign up for their newsletter. It just gets delivered to your email. They're talking about generative AI a lot, and basically saying that work activities basically will be automated or enriched by AI. Around 60% of your time will be automated or enriched by AI And they're really talking about the next 10 to 20 years. So, but at this point already, we're seeing massive change in how jobs are being enriched, not replaced necessarily, but enriched by AI. The second is Wall Street Journal, which talks about 80% of workers and occupations with at least one job can be performed more quickly. That's today. That's not future state. So 80% of workers are in occupations where at least one task can be performed more quickly using AI. That's you every day thinking about how you're using generative AI, so things like ChatGPT or Bard or Microsoft Copilot, to essentially offload. I had to write some, unpleasant HR letters recently. Not something that anybody wakes up and says, "This is what I want to do today," but ChatGPT actually made really an arduous process a much more palatable, to the point of like, oh, this is actually really helpful. It actually saved me probably an hour of my day. The last part is really understanding where this enriches roles and where it replaces roles. So Sam Altman, who's the co-founder of OpenAI, who created ChatGPT and really set a lot of this in motion for the sector, really reminds us that ChatGPT is a tool, not a creature. It gets confused, kind of just like humans do. We talk about hallucination within AI. Models do that just like humans do. But really remembering they're really good at doing tasks, not jobs. So first and foremost, I think it's important to reassure everyone that, I'm a firm believer, and I spend a lot of time in this, is that AI will not replace fundraisers. AI will not replace nonprofits, but nonprofits or fundraisers that use AI will replace those that don't. There's no doubt that if you compare, say, two college students, would be the easiest example. One is they're given the same assignment. One is allowed to use ChatGPT and whatever resources they want. The other is basically not allowed to use those same tools. One will perform their work usually around 60% faster, but also with a higher degree of accuracy and a higher degree of satisfaction, because they essentially offloaded some of the more mundane things. The same is absolutely true for fundraisers, for prospect development folks, donor relations folks, same thing. If we think about it really from this context of equating generative AI to the internet browser, and we ask the question, did the internet browser displace jobs? And probably mostly true, unless probably you're a librarian. The internet browser probably changed and actually diminished the need for librarians, but librarians still exist, but there are fewer of them. They're using things differently. But outside of that, the internet browser did not replace your job, but did it change the way you did your job? 100%, absolutely. We couldn't imagine a world today where we don't have an internet browser. So much of our time and work is conducted through a browser that connects us to more data. AI is exactly the same way. We're really only at the very beginning of this AI transformation. What we will see in the future will be vastly better, more accurate, and more accessible as time goes on. But we're really at this critical moment where our sector, but society is starting to harness AI to allow you to work smarter, not harder. Like, that's truly something we've always believed in and always wanted to be able to do. But the reverse has been true largely, is that software technology has actually created more work for most of us. AI is the ability to harness that software and have that software work for us, not for us to work for it. So if we really think about that, it's really about AI being used to harness the technology that we're already using and make it much more palatable and acceptable and easier to use. One of the downstream effects of AI, though, has been largely, well, it's changed society, and in some cases largely negative. So Tristan Harris is an early Apple and Google guy. He and his team invented the infinite scroll. So we can all blame him. This idea that the average person scrolls 300 feet a day now. Pre-scroll, if you remember back, you may not be older like I am, but you used to have to click on a button like next, 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 and that got really tiring, and our fingers hurt from clicking next all the time. Now the infinite scroll is that the internet never ends. We're just doing this 300 feet a day. Tristan Harris was a co-producer of the movie The Social Dilemma a few years ago. I think it was right before COVID or during COVID, which talked about this idea that AI was being used to essentially, was being able to use to capture your attention, and social media was that way, which we thought at the time, or the early engineers thought, AI will be the greatest level setter of the entire universe, that I can now connect with someone in Hong Kong that shares the same interests and passions that I do. And like, we literally could find each other and it would be like this harmonious, everyone singing the Coca-Cola song, kind of thing. And what we know to be true, and those early engineers talk about in the social dilemma, is that social media has had pretty much the opposite effect. That, things like depression are all-time high, anxiety is at all-time high, happiness is at all-time low, that because of social comparison and just this overwhelming desire for connection, that we're connecting to this atomized world, that it's actually had this really opposite effect. Back in the social dilemma, Tristan talks about this idea that this social media was created as a race to the bottom of the brainstem. So companies intentionally trying to find, and essentially, for a crude way of saying this, is trying to make zombies out of people so that you would just buy the product or follow the thing or whatever you're to do. What's an interesting development as AI has gotten better over time is that he recently came out on a new series. I think he recorded at a university, where he says, this is no longer a race to the bottom of the brainstem. This is a race to intimacy. Now, this, as nonprofit professionals, should make the hair on your neck stand up, because, intimacy is something that we equate with this sacred space between donors and missions, something that is so unique that people are putting their trust in us and our institutions in this really intimate way. Now, intimacy now is being harvested by Nike and AT&T, not to sell more things, but to create longer lifetime value, greater lifetime value of consumers. So the way businesses in the corporate world used to be evaluated was just based on how much revenue they could generate any particular year. But in a subscription economy, businesses are now evaluated based on how many people that they have that will go the distance. Like for Nike, how many people will stay overnight in a line on a cold street in New York to get the new pair of shoes that were coming out, which I don't understand. If you're one of those people, explain it to me someday. But the reality is that they're looking, for-profit businesses are now evaluated based on lifetime value. That was something only nonprofits used to talk about. It was about donors that would stay with us for a period of time, for a long period of time, and that we would be able to grow and nurture them in their donor journey. Essentially, what's happened is that for-profit businesses have used AI and taken a play out of the nonprofit playbook to not only attract the wallet, but also attract the heart, which is something that, again, was only really reserved for pretty much eternity in the past for nonprofit type work. So something to be conscious of. This is 3 quick, really kind of simple examples of this. But if we look at mission, vision, and values for 3 different organizations, we have a mission that exists to save the home planet. The vision is that we exist to fight for a fairer, more beautiful world, and values of human rights and dignity, economic justice, environmental protection, restoration, and regeneration. Easily, for most of my career, I would have said all these, well, this would be for Greenpeace, and this would be for Susan G. Komen something, and this would be for, I don't know. But in reality, these are the brands associated with those specific mission, vision, values. They are Patagonia, Body Shop, and Ben & Jerry's. And these are only 3 simple examples. For-profit organizations have learned the value of attracting the heart and the wallet to such a great extent that they are sounding like and acting more like nonprofits than ever before. Now, this only brings us to this notion, and I'll get to why AI makes sense, why it's a necessity for nonprofit, is that nonprofits now cannot think about essentially finite dollars in the sense of only charitable giving dollars. You are no longer competing with other nonprofits for dollars. You are competing with the world for connection, for attention. So at the end of the day, your nonprofit is evaluated by, say, a donor who wakes up and they turn off their Google alarm clock, they put on a pair of Nikes and maybe a Patagonia sweatshirt. They are all essentially making choices about where they spend money based on not just, is this a nonprofit that meets a traditional tax status of a 501c3, or is it an organization that is responsible in how they are taking my my consumer dollars in putting those to use. More than 50% of consumers will not buy from an organization that defies their personal values. So this brings this question, which I don't have in the slide, but Elon Musk last year was interviewed, and every time I bring him up, obviously it's like this massive debate. Is he good or bad? It's like how we used to debate Nicolas Cage and like if he's a good or bad actor. But Elon Musk was interviewed by Chris Anderson from TED Talks, TED organization last year. And he says that every one of his companies are philanthropy. Tesla is philanthropy, Boring Company's philanthropy, SpaceX is philanthropy because they're saving the planet, they're helping in climate crisis and so on, using the word, and then says, and since philanthropy is for the love of mankind, all my companies are philanthropy. So we have to ask ourselves a question: if I buy a Tesla, am I a philanthropist? I put that on LinkedIn last year, and it was the most commented on LinkedIn post I had made all year. And it was absolutely polarizing in terms of the comments. You could tell which people were from the nonprofit sector because they thought it was blasphemous that, you know, how could buying a Tesla make you a philanthropist? But half of the comments from people outside of philanthropy were saying, this absolutely is philanthropy. Why does it make any difference? If you're doing good, it is philanthropy. And so this is essentially trying to share the mindset and essentially the level of competition that you are facing for connection and for, well, basically, yeah, for connection. The effect of all of this, and as we distill this down and get more into the AI side, is it's had a dramatic effect on our own ability to connect. So we have to, again, take out our own personal biases on this, but put yourself in the shoes of your donors. Your donors are bombarded every day. Average person receives 333 emails a day and sees between 5,000 to 7,000 ad images a day. Absolutely bombarded to the point of like, I can't pay attention anymore. Social media, this advanced targeting that the private sector is using to essentially get your eyes onto a particular product at a specific time that you might buy something or so on, or need something. It's had a dramatic impact on our attention span. So back in 2000, just 23 years ago, our attention span was 12 seconds. Fast forward to now, our attention span is 8 seconds. And for those Ted Lasso fans will know the meaning of this, but when Ted Lasso says to be a goldfish, it's actually not hard at all, because a goldfish has a greater attention span than we do. So at the end of the day, this is not about you and I, this is about our donors and the amount of attention grabbing information that they have that are really trying to say, go here, do this, buy this, support this cause. Again, we have to approach things at a different way, and we have to compete at a level playing field. So enter the age of AI, where AI essentially is extremely broad term that is super confusing to most people. And at the end of the day, when I'm going to talk about AI in general, we're just talking about a type of software application, which is technically not software, a type of application that performs duties that humans once did. You know, classic example is a computer that plays chess better than, you know, a human. And that took 30 years for them to develop, by the way. So when they started working on a computer that could beat a human grandmaster at chess. So we're talking about, you know, AI is just a very general term. There's lots of flavors of it, like 31,000 flavors of AI. None of them are the same. Some are real, some are fake, and it's confusing because you have to be very discerning to find out which types of AI you're actually purchasing or using. Some have an immediate effect that's very positive, and very negative effects long term. So there's lots of questions I'll get into in a little bit. But just to break down the 6 kind of core technologies, this is like you're literally AI 101. You don't need to do the MIT certificate program because this is it. Their machine learning, deep learning is the largest area of AI. All it means is that it's taking lots of data and it's making predictions. So if you're predicting which donor is going to give, or which donor is going to give, or which donor is going to give again, or which prospect is going to make their first gift, that's machine learning, deep learning. I've been very good at that. We do that all day long. A lot of organizations have gotten pretty good at that. Automation is another form of AI that is essentially being used right now in conjunction with other types, where actually there's a very unsuccessful nonprofit story recently where they used a chat bot to field phone calls from a membership organization, and it was giving advice that was actually very harmful from a health perspective to their constituents. It was shut down almost immediately, but it, within a few days, but it ended up in the Chronicle of Philanthropy as just one of these things of like, we have to be very thoughtful and mindful and test things both from the short term and long term. Now, so I won't go too much more into that, otherwise I'll get caught in my soapbox. LLM and GPT is what everyone is hearing about right now since November of last year. ChatGPT is a large language model. It's also called generative AI. Generative AI essentially is just making other AI more accessible. It's very simple to understand that it essentially has read every word on the internet. And it essentially, when you ask it a series of questions, it's predicting which words come next. Very simple. If you're not using ChatGPT or Google Bard or Microsoft Copilot or Bing, it's actually, you have to, like, this has to be your homework for the day. Have it write a poem about your puppy that goes to space, or a rap song about a coworker's nickname or something, and you'll realize the potential that it has. And I can say, I started at .com in 1997, and that was transformative technology. But I've probably never caught myself saying, oh my gosh, to myself in a room by myself more often than using ChatGPT. Like, it just astounds me what it is able to do. The last three are a bit other subsets. Blockchain is what people think about cryptocurrency, but blockchain plays a really significant role in the future of philanthropy. If we think about gift agreements are a very inefficient contract between a donor and an organization that are built on paper and lots of trust. Blockchain is the ability to essentially create a bond between a donor and an organization that cannot be broken. It's unique to only that donor and to that organization. And it provides a tremendous amount of trust, which, if you can offload trust to blockchain, that means you have more time to spend building relationships with your donors in other ways versus defending essentially a gift agreement. We'll see a lot more of that in the next few years. Several people are experimenting with different things. Internet of Things are really where nonprofits are using wearable devices to measure whatever it's glucose levels of, in your blood, through a specific device or an Apple Watch or anything else. Lots of nonprofits are using IoT, Internet of Things, to find refugees in Rwanda, or match people using satellite images on an iPad. So there's just lots of different application there as well. The last one, which I'm really encouraged by, there's quite a few examples of AR and VR, augmented reality and virtual reality, where I used to work in a cancer hospital, and occasionally we would have a very wealthy donor that wanted to see a robotic surgery. We would get patient permission, of course, but we would go through the whole scrubbing up and gown and all that stuff, and have a donor sit in a surgical room with a doctor and a patient on the table, which I think pretty much is an icky thing to do. If you could think about, like, is this good, from a health perspective for the donor or the patient? Probably not. But with virtual reality, you can transport a person with goggles into a surgical room. You can let them do the surgery. You can really do an amazing way of immersing people in these experiences. Stanford recently did a study that showed that virtual reality actually, when studied, increases empathy. And so Charity Water is a great example, World Vision and others. We have a few clients that are using augmented and virtual reality right now. So stay on the lookout. It's still expensive to develop, but it's absolutely getting cheaper as more companies like Apple are coming out with their Vision Pro goggles later in the year as well. So yeah, and there's a question from Angela. Go ahead, Angela. Oh, and you're on mute.
Yeah. Thanks, Nathan. I'm wondering about blockchain. I didn't quite track that. What is it does that builds that trust?
Yeah, so blockchain so the way cryptocurrency is transferred, that means that if I'm going to buy crypto, which I can't see or touch, but I feel entirely secure that it's mine and nobody can take it from me, it's essentially a line to a very, it's a confusing a line of code that can't be broken. And if anyone tries to break it, it basically shuts itself down. And so blockchain itself, like, if you think about and this is probably more used in international nonprofits right now. If I think about if I wanted to send $500 to a migrant farm worker in Nairobi, it would be painful, but I'd have to find, let's say an organization, maybe World Vision or some other organization that would then probably subcontract with another organization that's in Nairobi, and then subcontract with someone in the local area to get a portion of the money. So that migrant farm worker probably receives $300 to the $500, maybe, if that. Well, if I was able to use blockchain to send $500 to that migrant farm worker, only that person would be able to unlock the code. It would remove any intermediaries in that. So that's where it provides a level of trust that, it is going to the intended purposes. And blockchain also has this ability to say, I'm going to send you this money, but unless you do these 3 things, it's part of my contract, the money won't be released to you. It's able to follow kind of contract principles, so that, say, when I was at City of Hope, a cancer center, if someone sent us money through blockchain and it required us to send a acknowledgement letter to ensure that the principal investigator acknowledged the gift and did something else, only when those 3 things are satisfied, the money would be released. And no people are involved in that. So it provides a tremendous amount of trust for the individual who are making the gift. Does that help?
Yes, thanks for that explanation of the philanthropic applications of it.
Yeah, I think that's where there's only a few people studying this, but there's some really great application of it. When we talk about so much of our energy and time is spent on building trust, how about we take the most simple things, allow technology that is built around that idea of trust. Let's use technology for that. That means I can spend other time, deepening my relationship with the donor. Okay, so all this to say, and this is obviously a shameless plug. And in fact, any proceeds, royalties that my co-author and I have received from Generosity Crisis have been donated to charity. So this is not selfish in the sense, but the effect of all of this technology and the competition for connection, everything that I've shared today, has resulted in a 16% decline in the percentage of people that give in our country. So 20 years ago, 2/3 of Americans gave to charity. Now, most people know this now, less than 49% of Americans give to charity. We released this book last November, before we just experienced with Giving USA report that just came out a few months ago, the largest decline in individual giving in the history of the Giving USA report. The wheels have literally fallen off charitable giving, where people are, we can say that it's inflation, that people just don't have money. But we also look at the US had the busiest travel day in history this year. The passport office has received record number of passport applications this year than any other time in history. People are yes, inflation is real. People are stretched, but people are spending money in other ways and choosing not to spend it through philanthropy. This book is really to call attention to what's at stake. So many of the societal benefits that we've grown used to, whether it's our own personal charities or other things that we do, are provided through, whether it's going to a play or a zoo or a museum or a cancer hospital, and so on and so on and so on. A society that's far less generous than it is today doesn't look good for anyone. It doesn't play well for our kids or grandkids and so on. The book itself is really a call to say, look, we have made giving very transactional, largely because of the technology that we've been using for the last 20 years. We've equated wealth to philanthropy, which is actually a really bad idea. And therefore, people are opting out from giving to organizations. My work in AI, in fact, is a result of this. So in 2017, I started working in AI because I was asked to raise more money from less people every year. I started studying essentially this effect of the generosity crisis back in 2012 to realize, like, we cannot continue doing the same thing and expect a different result. So if anyone's inclined to read it, it's obviously available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. The Audible version is great also. And again, all royalties for the book for myself and our co-authors have gone to charity. So I just encourage you to pick it up. At the end of the day, here's the deal. We wanted to write a chapter in our book where we talked about what are the ways that we can reverse this generosity crisis. And one of the key, you have to read the book to know all the key differences. There's most of the book is dedicated to really understanding how we got to this point. But one of the only scalable solutions, we wanted to write a chapter on like, this is how we're going to fix this. And the reality is the chapter never got written. We couldn't think of a single organization or way that we can instill the virtues of giving at a very young age, that people typically learn about generosity from their parents, and moms specifically, from studies show. Religion has played a really important role. No matter what religion you are, people that align with any religious affiliation give twice as much, and are not to just their religious institution, but outside as well. And they're twice as likely to give. But telling people to go find a church was not a scalable solution. So really, we came to this conclusion that AI is the only scalable solution to help reverse these declines. The reality is, though, not all AI is created equal. And so I'll talk a little bit more about this. When we compare this against 50 to 60% of for-profits that are already using almost 4 versions of AI at the least, we look at this fact that 89% of nonprofits believe that AI will make them more efficient, but only 28% are either experimenting with it or using it. So the digital divide between the nonprofit sector and the private sector is massive, but we're competing for the same thing. We're competing for connection. So literally, we're just not equipped to compete for connection in the way that the private sector has. So hopefully this is all kind of coming together and should make us really think about this. So, all right. So at the end of the day, most people will ask, how do we look at evaluating AI? It's not that hard, actually. And so this is really kind of 4 main ways that all AI is just evaluated. And so if you're either thinking about building AI or buying AI, questioning a vendor, you want to think about the ROIs being around precision and personalization. So does this give you precision in the sense of like, now I know who to go to, so I don't have to just find the wealthy people and take them to lunch for 2 years until they cry uncle or I cry uncle, which is I did way too often in my career, obviously. Really think about it as far as an efficiency tool. It's not a fundraising tool. AI is not something that you should think about to offload fundraising to. That actually will hurt our industry more than help. It is about creating efficiency for your team to work smarter, not harder. That's it. The quality of work is also significant. Using AI to proof a donor letter versus having another colleague take a look at it. That is an efficiency of saving 20 minutes of a colleague's time is a tremendous ROI. But most people are thinking about ROI as like, well, how much more money is this going to help us raise? It's absolutely the wrong way to think about AI. Absolutely wrong. It's all about efficiency. And then outside of that, which is actually really significant, is about employee satisfaction. Fundraiser burnout is a real thing in our industry, and it has been for a really long time. Average fundraiser stays in their job, you all know this, for 18 months. And that costs organizations a tremendous amount. It costs them in trust with their donors. It costs them in onboarding new people, recruiting people, and so on. If you have people that have a higher degree of precision, so they're right more often, so they're more successful in their job, you've also offloaded the mundane tasks to AI so that I don't have to do the things I don't like to do, and I could do more of the things I like to do. You are going to be happier as an employee. AI plays a really, really critical role in employee satisfaction, which has plagued our industry and really needs to address it. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of questions that we have to ask, and we'll allow time for Q&A at the end. And if anyone wants to get into these, I'll just pose the questions now and we can talk about them later. But it really comes down to this idea: will AI replace fundraisers? Will it replace nonprofits? How does prospect research shift in AI from a command and control, like you control the data and you hand out prospects kind of like candy, versus you enable an organization to create insights where essentially insights are democratized within your organization? It's a big transformation. How has AI increased expectations from donors? Think about it again. Your donors are consumers. First and foremost, they spend far more time consuming than donating of their average day in life. What are their expectations for you getting to know them versus how American Express sends me a birthday card weeks before my birthday, or Starbucks knows I get more, satisfaction knowing that Starbucks knows my birthday than most nonprofits I've given to for many years. So let's be honest about that. Are junior staff members no longer required, since so much of that is offloaded? McKinsey, in fact, is not hiring near as many junior consultants, because a lot of the work that they would have done of researching Google and so on is now, frankly, done very simply. What will it take? And I guess so this is AI fact checking. Yes. The last two are probably the most important questions. And the last one is probably the most. What happens if we don't change? I think I painted a pretty gruesome picture of what happens if we don't change. The second to that is, what would it take to change? And does your organization have the appetite to fully embrace essentially what we call not just digital transformation, but AI transformation? Because I didn't want to leave you hanging on the 5 ahas of using AI. These are 5 things truly that I learned the hard way. When we created our first machine learning models back in 2017, we didn't know what we were doing. We had a really smart team of PhD statisticians. We had PhD computer scientists. We spent 1.5 years building our first model, and we learned a lot of things the hard way. These are 5 things that if you essentially are going to evaluate or build AI, you can save yourself a lot of heartache by following essentially these 5 principles. The first is that people are complex. Our industry has been using regression models to essentially measure, is this person a good donor, which is absolutely the wrong way to look at it. The way we should be looking at this is, how well does this person know our organization? Doesn't matter if essentially the bias being that if they are a donor or a prospect. It's really, the question is not, are they a donor or a prospect? It's how well do they know our organization? And therefore, based on lots of data, which AI is built to use, instead of using 12 data points to say, or an RFM model uses 3 data points, which is horrific, is that we can use 1,000 data points and get, with a greater degree of precision, this idea that people are really complex. People should not be measured in 3 data points. The second is that people never stay the same. That my affinity to an organization today will slightly change tomorrow. That will be represented whether I open their email or whether they call me and just thank me for my last donation, whether I get an appeal and I'm like, I want to make a donation, or I want to advocate, or I want to go on this walk because it spoke to me. That models in our industry have been static. They've measured people at a point in time, and then a year later or 3 years later, or however often later, or maybe never, you reassess them. The reality is AI, like Amazon, reassesses your behavior every day. Every time you buy something, like something, share something, return something, AI, AWS or Amazon recalculates the odds of you buying something new every time. Your algorithm is dynamic, just like you are. AI in the nonprofit sector has to be the same way. It cannot be the static, I do it one time episodically once every year, or a couple of years, or 10 years, when we're facing a difficult challenge. The third, which I already spoke to, donors and prospects are uniquely different. Every model I ever built or bought in my career measured prospects against donors. Therefore, every prospect always scored lower than every donor. Every time, 100% of the time. Mathematically, if you measure a prospect against a donor, a prospect will score worse because they haven't made a donation. It's just very simple math. But that's also to say that a prospect doesn't care about your organization as much as a donor. It just, maybe they haven't manifested their connection to you in a gift yet. So separating donors and prospects and measuring both populations independently, completely independently, based on each is representative level of connection, is actually one of the biggest breakthroughs we've ever had in AI and mathematically understanding the motivations of giving. It cannot be dismissed. We made lots of mistakes the hard way on this. Any organization that measures prospects against donors is really not doing themselves a favor, because essentially you're penalizing people that may care about you deeply that just haven't made a gift, and therefore they never end up on your radar. The fourth, we have to admit, sending more mail, sending more emails is not the answer. It's actually adding to the problem. I posted on LinkedIn last year, I nerdily save all my mail solicitations that I get in the mail. I can't keep track of all my email solicitations, but last year I received 8.7 pounds of mail solicitations from nonprofits, only 3 impact reports. 8.7 pounds, 3 impact reports. It's not about acquiring another donor. Our industry has fallen for this notion that just send out more and just bombard people more, and incrementally you're going to win the game if you just send out more. The reality is, and there's several direct response vendors like RKD has been really vocal about this lately, is that it's not about more donors anymore. It's about better donors. We all know this to be true. It's about those that are going to stay with you. The average person that gives you a one-time donation has an 18% chance they're going to stay with you and make another gift. But like a sustainer is about a 78 or 80% retention rate. It's about better donors, not more donors. Again, preaching to the choir here. The last part, which is very different in our sector than any other sector, is that generosity requires trust. And when we talk about trust in AI, the White House will talk about trust and building trustworthy AI that serves humanity's greatest needs or purpose. They're essentially talking about trust in AI of not killing people eventually. When we talk about trust in the nonprofit sector, it's all about, it's the everything. The currency of our sector is trust. So that means that AI has to be completely transparent and in this no black box kind of idea, that it has to be explainable. You have to be able to interrogate it. You have to be able to know what's going into it. How can you trust something that you can't see? In our sector, trust is everything, not a nice to have. And so therefore, this fifth evolution is what I've dedicated a majority of my time this last year to help create, which is this idea that responsible AI is everyone's responsibility. Whether you're a nonprofit practitioner that is using AI because your organization bought it, you're building it, whether you're a platform that you're supporting it or monitoring it, it's everyone's responsibility. It doesn't just fall on the platforms that are building it. And I'll wrap this part up really quick to give ourselves a little more time. The idea here, and hopefully I've made a convincing argument, that there's no future for any organization not using AI. The digital divide is not growing in time. It's growing in cycles of development. AI grows in cycles. It doesn't grow in time. It gets better and better exponentially. There's no future where you and your organization are not using forms of AI. So that part is a given. There's no thrill in trying to convince someone you need to use AI. But the effective implementation of AI is totally what it all comes down to. In fact, there's a study came out yesterday that said 70% of success in AI has to do with the people and the culture, not the data or the models. Only 30% of success in AI is data and models. 70% is change management. I absolutely believe this is true. We've had lots of success stories with clients using AI. We've had failures, absolutely. Every time there's a failure, it has to do with people and lack of adoption or understanding of how they can embrace this instead of fighting against it. The reality here, and to reference back to the generosity crisis, irresponsible AI that doesn't prioritize trust will exacerbate and accelerate the generosity crisis. People will disappear from your portfolios and from your pipeline very quickly if you do things that diminish trust. And so this is why it's absolutely incumbent upon everyone in our sector to really understand this. So I've been working on this ad hoc group. This is all, I have a paid job, but this is all my volunteer job. This is not a real company. It's not a real nonprofit. This is a true collaboration of every organization, competitors, platforms, practitioners together that we've been meeting for a few years. This last year, AFP Icon, we got together in a room, about 60, 70 people. And we talked about, look, we can't afford, our sector can't afford to do harm using AI. What are the 3 things that we could do that will help our sector internationally be more responsible in this area? The first was a decision from this group, the consensus of the group, to create a framework for responsible AI for fundraising. You don't have to invent one. You don't have to use one from Google because they frankly don't even understand what fundraising is. You can have one that's built by fundraisers for fundraisers. The second is to host a global summit on responsible fundraising that's entirely free, fully sponsored, so everyone can join. And the third is to do a readiness and adoption research study internationally. In fact, I was on a call with the university in the UK this morning where we're putting this in motion right now to do this study. We came out with this thing, and actually fundraising AI was the birth of this. Again, this is all volunteer. I mean, thousands of volunteer hours from 150 people have gone into this, is that we created 10 tenets of responsible AI. I don't need to read these to you, because if you go to fundraising.ai, you can click on framework and you can read all these in detail, and you can read what they mean. And literally, if you were going to evaluate AI and any vendor, pull up the framework and ask that vendor, are you doing these things? If you comply with these 10 things, I would hire you. If you can't comply with these 10 things, I'd have like a significant concern about that. So again, fundraising.ai is the place to go. Here's a QR code even for it, even though fundraising.ai is pretty memorable, I hope, and you can get to it. The summit is a whole different beast. So we started making calls to Amazon and Microsoft and Salesforce and Blackbaud and Martin Lundy and Ben Twaley-Flessner, the consulting firms and platforms, where we raised $350,000 within 4 weeks to fully sponsor a summit for 10,000 people. That's entirely free with 30 tracks that you can, from a beginner 101 to the most advanced, you can go and register for the summit today for free. And you can pick one session or you can pick all 30 sessions. They are built with different tracks. We have a keynote track. We have a platform track. So those are building and maintaining models. And then we have a fundraiser track. So at the end of the day, there's something for everyone. And it is extremely well choreographed. No, all money that we've raised from all the vendors that have sponsored this has been funneled through Giving Tuesday. They're not taking even 1% of it. It's going to a team that we hired, mainly Mallory Erickson, who runs a podcast called What the Fundraising. If you don't follow Mallory, What the Fundraising podcast, Spotify and Apple, she's absolutely amazing. I love her to death. She's put a team around her to conduct the summit for 10,000 people. I'm at this point just a volunteer leader of this and probably our biggest cheerleader. But I encourage you all today, sign up for the summit. You'll be getting the emails. There's no cost to you, and send it to your teams. I mean, really, our goal is to get 10,000 people to join this, because I think there's so much at stake and our industry deserves to have its own deep dive in this issue. The last part, you can reach me. Frankly, LinkedIn is probably one of the best ways. LinkedIn, Nathan Chappell. Fundraising.ai obviously is where I spend a lot of my time. My personal email address is nathan@nathanchappell.com. If you want to ask me any questions or complain about donor search, it's totally fine. That's where you do that. But anything I can do to help, we're really, really big into advancing this idea of responsible AI. Of course, we support our clients extremely well, but on the personal side of bringing people around the world, we have groups from Kenya, Australia, Canada, UK, all coming together. And it's amazing to see, this is not a US issue, that around the world, people are really looking at the promise of using AI to make their job more efficient and to reverse the generosity crisis, and also doing our very, very best to protect our industry from doing harm. So with that, I'll be quiet, add a few minutes for questions, and if anyone has any, and I'm always happy to connect later on as well.
Thanks, Nathan. Anybody have questions for Nathan today before we wrap up?
Hopefully I didn't put people to sleep.
Hi. I have one question. I'm assuming that the summit is virtual.
Oh, yes. Yeah, thank you. It's virtual. Yeah, very little barrier here. So it's free. It's virtual. It's October 23rd and 24th. All sessions will be recorded. So if you sign up, they will all be posted on the Fundraising AI website, I think the day after. And so you can go back and review or catch up on anything you might have missed. Thanks for asking that. Yeah.
Sure.
Nathan, I do have a question for you. I work on the Research Council through AFP International, and we actually at the conference, International Conference on Fundraising back in April, I did bring AI up to the group as far as what we were doing as an institution, AFP globally, to address AI and its appropriate use in fundraising. And they haven't really tackled that matter yet. I'm just curious, if you've had any discussion with them or if they've reached out to you at all about AI.
No. So thanks for bringing that up. And in fact, it was always our hope, because fundraising AI is truly open source, right? And I mean, it's not owned by anyone. There's no intellectual property with it. Is our hope in the very beginning would be membership organizations like AFP and APRA and ASP would adopt the framework, and therefore like AASP, Association of Advancement Service Professionals, has talked about making it part of their membership requirement, right? So the AFP Code of Ethics, kind of same thing. They have not reached out. They've had a lot of things going on, as you know, probably, so maybe that's taken priority. But I think any conversation that you can help with, I would be really appreciative for. Our hope is, again, we actually have a advisory council now with the framework as well. So the framework, we know it's not perfect, but it will never be done. I was speaking with Microsoft, their global head of AI ethics yesterday. They're faking it too. Everyone in the industry is literally doing the best they can today, knowing that it will change tomorrow. So our group of advisors is reviewing the framework every quarter and adjusting, essentially editing it. We would love if AFP adopted the framework for responsible fundraising. That would be amazing. So anything you could help with would be fantastic.
I think they will, and we've not met since the conference, so I'm certain that this will be coming back up again.
I'm happy to speak to any group. I just haven't. I've never been. I speak at a lot of AFP chapters. I've never been super plugged into the Borg of AFP. So you might be the best conduit for that, actually.
Happy to help.
Yeah.
Who else? Anybody else have any questions?
I was just gonna, hey, Doug, it's Mark Goldstein.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, yeah, I was just gonna say, Nathan, the quiet, at least from where I'm concerned, it was not at all that it was boring. Just trying to take it all in and not be too overwhelmed with what this might mean for, fundraising. And but no, it was really helpful information. And also, I'm pretty active with Grant Professionals Association, and just wanted to mention they did come out a couple weeks ago with sort of a report on what they think are suitable and not suitable uses for grant writers.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably posted up on their website, but I just thought I'd make a brief mention of that too for anybody who's interested in that on the call.
Yeah, that's an important resource for sure for a lot of people. That's a lot of talk. I had a conversation with Grants Plus this week, or a fairly large grant outsourcing organization. And then I do quite a bit of work with Grantable, which is on the opposite end of they're using AI to write grants. And there are really very few guidelines on like what's appropriate or not. So thanks for bringing that up. I will say, as far as the overwhelming aspect, that's not new for me, obviously. And I get excited about this, and I remain entirely optimistic about the ability of AI to help and not hurt our sector. I would say the biggest comfort in all of it is that understanding you will never be ready to start AI, but you'll also never be done using it. And so if you just like let that sink in and realize like, I don't have to have everything perfect, because I'll never have everything perfect. AI is iterative. AI is dynamic, so it changes all the time. So you can put away the fear of like, I'm not ready for it. You have to embrace that it is the thing and it's the future, but understanding that it's also never going away. So just kind of learn, like if you're completely new to AI and you have no idea, go on ChatGPT today, and that would be your first kind of like homework. And, start out with those simple kind of stupid examples that, writing a poem about something, and then take it to the next level. And next thing you know, you're going to have it proof a letter to a donor or something else. And you're like, wow, this is really helpful. And so starting is key. I think that's the whole thing. It can be totally overwhelming. I get it. But starting, just like day by day, just starting will make it much more disarming.
Nathan, we're about to wrap up. I just want to say thank you. I think one of the things that you presented today that really resonated with me was that this doesn't replace people, but it helps us be more efficient
Right.
And I think you're also spot on about the employee satisfaction. That is a crisis for our industry, and something
Yeah.
that we need to be addressing. And I'm not surprised at the slow adoption of the nonprofit industry to AI. And we typically are a little slow on adapting new technology and things like that. And that's why we had this conversation today. And we hope that your presentation will inspire more of us to get on board a little bit sooner than later, because I think we recognize the importance and significance of it. So if it's possible, Nathan, we'd love a copy of the slides that we could.
Happy to send
to
over.
everybody.
Yeah, feel free to do that. And I think the session will be recorded, and so if any team members want to see it, please share it. But thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to connect with you all this morning.
Yep. Thank you, Nathan. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we will look forward to seeing you at next month's program. Have a great day, everyone.
Take care.